Jehovah's Witnesses are having a hard time in Russia, but this week, a judge imposed an 8-year suspended sentence on a 24-year-old Jehovah's Witness and a 7-year suspended sentence on his 27-year-old wife. A suspended sentence basically means they have to serve the 8 years, but they can do it on probation instead of actually behind bars. If they break the rules of probation, they serve the rest of their time in prison. There are a lot of rules that come with probation, although it's obviously better than sitting in jail, especially since this means the husband and wife can stay together. I don't know about Russia, but I assume probation is similar to the US. No drinking, no drugs, you have to maintain steady employment, no firearms, follow a curfew, sometimes you have to live in specific areas, that kind of thing. It's doable for a Jehovah's Witness, or I guess an ex-Jehovah's Witness now. I imagine there are other terms to the probation too. Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia are allowed to believe whatever they want, but they aren't allowed to gather for religious services, and they aren't allowed to possess any contraband, aka Jehovah's Witnesses literature. This happened a day after another judge handed down 6 other suspended sentences. Honestly, as an atheist, I think religion is ridiculous and harmful to society. I would rather live in a world where it didn't exist at all. That said, I believe in freedom. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. That's the humanist position. Thanks to what Russia is doing right now, Jehovah's Witnesses are getting a lot of sympathy from the outside. You might manage to eradicate the religion from within Russia, but they're garnering sympathy everywhere else, thanks to what's happening there. They've become martyrs. They're more powerful in death. Russia is making a mistake and directly counteracting the work I'm trying to do, not to mention the fact that this is setting a bad precedent. If they can outlaw this, what other beliefs or philosophical positions are they willing to outlaw? Donald Trump Jr. went on a show called What's on Your Mind recently, and on the show, he claimed his dad literally saved Christianity. Let's listen to the clip.
He's protected the Second Amendment. He's literally saved Christianity. I mean, there's a full-out war on faith in this country by the other side. I mean, the Democratic Party, the far left, has become the party of the quote-unquote atheist. I mean, they want to attack Christianity. They want to close churches. They want to, they're totally fine keeping liquor stores open, but they want to close churches all over the country. I mean, look what he's done in the Middle East. Peace in the Middle East. Look what he's done with prescription drug prices, like, insulin going on.
That was a whole lot of garbage. First of all, there isn't an all-out war against faith by the Democrats, aka the other side. The Democrat Party is still extremely religious. Too religious, in my opinion. And as a defense against this bullshit, the leaders of the Democrat Party are trying to show they're just as religious as the Republicans. And nobody wants to close churches for the sake of closing them. If you want to see what that looks like, look at Russia. They are actually closing churches for the sake of closing them and giving the members 10-year sentences. Literally nobody in the U.S. has been charged for assembling safely because nobody gives a shit if you do it safely. Like, for example, through Zoom. Religious groups aren't subject to any laws that everybody else isn't subject to. And finally, in response to that last part about drug prices in the US and peace in the Middle East, no. That's ridiculous. Insulin is not quote-unquote like water, as Trump says. It's not free. People are paying out the nose to have the medicine they need. And there is not peace in the Middle East. Basically, nothing he said was true. If you really believe Trump literally saved Christianity, as Trump Jr. said, let me ask you these 2 questions. What was Trump trying to save Christianity from? And what specifically did he do to save it? In case you haven't heard, a terrorist group attempted to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan governor. The group used the lockdown protests from March and April to recruit new members. Well, our old buddy Pastor Rick Wiles had some things to say about it. Bear in mind, these people are officially classified as terrorists. And why wouldn't we expect Christian pastors to come to their defenses? Pastor Rick Wiles spoke out in their favor the other day. This is what he said.
I got something to say to the governor. Did you at all stop and think, what are you doing that drives middle-class, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens to think about kidnapping you? What are you doing? Are your policies so extreme, so radical, that you're pushing people over the line to say we have to get that woman out of the governor's office?
I love it. Blame the victim. Great plan. First of all, they weren't law-abiding citizens, obviously. They attempted to kidnap a governor. And second, their stated goal was to spark a civil war. That's what they wanted to do. That's what they said. That doesn't sound like a law-abiding group to me. They sound like they have a few screws loose. The most disturbing part of this whole thing is the fact that religious leaders are defending terrorists. But that's what happens in religious nationalist countries. How many religious leaders in Saudi Arabia supported the 9/11 hijackers? The Saudi Arabian government funded the operation. We're sitting here watching the exact same thing play out in the U.S., only this time it's Christian nationalists instead of Islamic nationalists. And the U.S. government and U.S. mega churches have a lot more money to throw around. Apparently, Hillary Clinton has a podcast. I thought she disappeared off the face of the planet 4 years ago, but I guess she's still around. If you guys didn't know, she's super religious, and she's had some interesting takes on religious issues recently. She was interviewing a reverend named Reverend William J. Barber II. Here's what she had to say.
How do you see now what the church should be doing? Because a lot of people are leaving the church. A lot of young people are leaving the church, in part because the way they understand what Christianity has become is, so judgmental, so alienating, that they think to themselves, well, I don't need that. I don't want to be part of that. So this should also be a time for the church to take a hard look at itself and try to figure out how it can be a real partner in this moment of moral awakening.
I appreciate what she's trying to do here. She's trying to say the church needs to catch up with modern society. But that's the problem, isn't it? The church is always trying to catch up. It's never leading the way in morality. It's always been the one standing in the way of gay marriage, standing in the way of abolitionists trying to fight to end slavery. They even used Bible verses to justify it. The church believes that God is all-knowing and inerrant. They've always believed the Bible was set in stone. Reinterpreting the Bible to be favorable to abolitionism or gay marriage is betraying God. Why should we want the church involved in society's moral awakening? They've only ever stood in the way. Personally, I want the church to shut up and stay out of politics. That would make everybody's life a lot easier. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, had some stern words for the New York Jewish community recently. An activist mommy didn't like it. She wrote an article about what he had to say. He said, quote, "I have to say to the Orthodox community tomorrow, if you're not willing to live with these rules, then I'm going to close the synagogues," end quote. There have been serious protests in the Orthodox Jewish community recently, and for reasons most people don't realize, Jewish people tend to have the support of Christians in the U.S. The reason is because Christians believe that Jewish people have to occupy Israel before Armageddon can start. Evangelical Christians only tend to support the Jewish community because they're a part of their Christian prophecy. They still think they're wrong, and they still think they're going to pay the price with their lives for being wrong, but they're important keys to the doctrine. So don't let activist mommy's motivations fool you. The fact that she's running to the Jewish community's defense here is only for the sake of doctrine, not because she respects these people in any way. At any rate, the Orthodox Jewish community in New York is actually very extreme, and they've basically completely disregarded any safety precautions. They think they're sticking it to the man, but honestly, they're only hurting themselves. It's a real shame they won't see that until it's too late. Liberty Counsel, a Christian legal group, wrote an article recently about how bad anti-Christian bigotry is. It mostly revolves around the fact that the government is imposing safety laws regarding COVID, i.e., they have to assemble online instead of in person, or they have to take specific safety precautions if they do meet in person, like making everybody wear masks, having hand sanitizer nearby, keeping 6 feet distance between people, that kind of thing. I guess that amounts to religious persecution in these people's minds. Here's a quote from the article written by Liberty Counsel. Quote, "The enemy wants God's people silenced in every possible way. No churches, no outside worship, no home Bible studies, and no mention of the Bible at all when offering social services or educational courses to more than a handful of attendees. No displays of 10 Commandments or the birth of Christ at Christmas. No right for individuals to choose Bible-based Christian counseling, and no devout justice on the Supreme Court. The enemy wants to eradicate Christianity and faith in our nation. America is the only nation in the history of the world, other than Israel, to be founded on the Word of God. The fact is, Judeo-Christian values are the foundation of our free republic." End quote. That is laughable. If they want to see real religious persecution, look to Russia. or China, or any number of other authoritarian countries. They're around. You can see real examples of it. They aren't fighting for a free society, they're fighting for Christian nationalism. And it couldn't possibly be more clear. They are a disgrace to what Jesus purportedly stood for. If Jesus was real, he wasn't, but if he was, he'd be ashamed of what his followers have turned into. I have no clue how Jesus became the symbol of gun-loving, neighbor-hating extremists, the exact opposite of what Jesus taught.